If you grew up in Canada, the United States, UK, Australia, or maybe another English-speaking country, there's a good chance that English is the only language that you use and know. And because English has become the international language of business, many native English speakers can travel almost anywhere in the world and still communicate in English. After a while, it's easy to begin assuming that everyone else will simply adjust to our language. We rarely stop to think about how non-native speakers need to make an effort to communicate with us. You arrive in Indonesia. Suddenly, English is no longer the dominant language outside the office. And even inside many multinational companies, although English is the official working language, it's not necessarily the language that employees are most comfortable using. In fact, the foreign manager may be the least multilingual person in the room. Many Indonesians grow up speaking a regional language at home, a dialect. Then they go to school, learn Bahasa Indonesia, and later they learn English because they know it can open the doors to a better education and maybe better career opportunities. Indonesia itself has more than 300 regional languages and dialects. So moving between languages is simply a normal part of life that Indonesians do. But being able to speak English doesn't mean that people understand English in the same way that you do. And that's where the miscommunication begins. For most people that use a second language, there's some form of translation that's happening in their minds as they're listening to the conversation. Sometimes they're translating word for word. Other times they have enough experience to understand the meaning within the context. But the way that you understand a word or an expression is based on your lifetime of experiences using English. The way that they understand is based on their understanding. So many times those experiences may be very different. You might leave a meeting believing that your team has understood 80% of what you said, but in actuality, they may have only understood 50% or 60%. But the difficult part is neither of you know which percent that is. They may understand the task, but misunderstood the priority. They may understand the deadline, but not the level of urgency that is associated with that deadline. They may have understood every single individual word that you used, but still interpret the entire overall meaning differently than what you intended. English ability isn't just one skill. Someone may be comfortable chatting in English or over lunch. They may give a presentation very well in English. But when the conversation becomes technical, abstract, emotional, or unexpected, it requires a completely different level of language ability. And us native English speakers also make communication harder without realizing it. We speak quickly. We shorten sentences. We use idioms when translated directly have a totally different meaning. Like, let's circle back. Keep me in the loop. We need to move the needle. Or, can you make a first pass at this? To us, these expressions feel perfectly normal, and we understand the intent of the message. To someone who's processing English as a second language, we've just added another level of interpretation. There's another point that many people never think about. Even native English speakers don't always use the same form of English. For example, if someone from Canada says that they're going to put something in the trunk of the car, then I know exactly what they mean. But from someone that is from England may talk about putting something in the boot. And an Australian might say that they're putting something in the ute, which a North American would call a pickup truck. And if an Australian says that they're wearing thongs, they're talking about flip-flops. But a North American may translate that totally differently. We're all speaking English, but we're not necessarily interpreting the same meaning. Now, imagine how much more complicated that becomes for someone who has learned English in a classroom and has never lived in an English-speaking country. Another situation that often confuses foreign managers is hearing that their Indonesian team suddenly switches back to Bahasa Indonesia during a discussion. In some cultures, speaking another language in front of someone who doesn't understand it is considered rude or deliberately excluding them from the conversation. That generally is not the case in Indonesia. Your team usually switches back to Bahasa Indonesia because it's easier. They can explain complicated ideas to one another faster. They can check that everybody understands correctly. They solve the problem efficiently. They're not usually trying to exclude you. They're trying to communicate with each other in the language that requires the least mental effort. Once they're confident that they all understand the issue, then often they switch back to English to include you in the discussion. So what do you do? First, use simple, precise English. Simple English doesn't mean that you're speaking down to your people. It means removing unnecessary complexity. Instead of saying, "We need to get the ball rolling," say, "Please begin this today." Instead of saying, "Let's touch base later," say, "Let's meet again at 3 o'clock." Specific language leaves much less room for interpretation. Secondly, slow down. Not because your team isn't intelligent, but because they're processing a second language. Give people time to think. Pause between important points. And don't try to explain 5 different ideas in one long sentence, one at a time. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification yourself. Many expat managers feel that they need to have all the answers, but sometimes the best question is, "What does this mean to you?" Or, "Can you explain it to me?" Those types of questions don't test your team's English. They help you discover where the misunderstanding is happening. Remember, communication is a two-way responsibility, both to the receiver as well as the listener. Making it clear and asking for clarification isn't a sign of weakness. It's part of doing the job well. And finally, be patient. When your team is using Bahasa Indonesia with one another, remember, they're communicating with you in your language every day. Very few expats can communicate in their language to them. Recognizing the effort that they're making will naturally make you a more patient, a better understanding, and ultimately a more effective leader. Language is only one piece of the puzzle. Understanding Indonesian culture is what transforms the communication to the next level. And that's exactly what cultural coaching is designed to help you do. If your company is preparing you to come to Indonesia, or maybe one of your employees to go outside of Indonesia for an assignment, a few hours spent with me understanding the culture can save months of frustration later. I'm Jean Sugandi, and for more than 30 years, I've lived and worked in Indonesia. As a cultural coach, I help expatriates, managers, and their families successfully adapt to life and business here in Indonesia. If you'd like to discuss a cultural coaching program for yourself, your leadership team, or your organization, I'd be delighted to help you. And if you found this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel. Every week, I share practical insight to help you communicate more effectively, build strong relationships, understand your team better, and actually enjoy working and flourishing in Indonesia. We'll see you in the next one.